That is emphasize some key dates and steps and address lots of the questions that we've gotten from students and families. We hope to do that over the next 30 minutes or so, with 15 minutes at the end for whatever questions you may have. A couple of quick disclaimers. We tried to build in up front as many answers to questions we got through the registration process and as many questions as we've gotten along the way so far. There are lots of questions and we only have so much time this evening. So we will not be able to get to everybody's questions, but we got as much ground covered in this presentation as possible. And this presentation is very text heavy. That is not our preference, but we're recording this so that you can refer back to it later. And so that those who were not able to join us this evening will be able to watch it and be able to refer back to it later as well. Additionally, there'll be a question and answer session at the end and an opportunity to reach out to us at any point via email for whatever questions you don't get answered this evening or anything you might need some additional clarification about later. So again, we're so glad you're here, and we hope that by the end of this presentation, you'll have lots more information and lots of clarity about how this process will work and what to expect.
You will note that in the presentation, again, as Christy indicated, we use RTCL to refer to return to campus living. It is so important that both students and parents who may be nudging their students along understand what that means. It's a lottery-based appointment process, and it gives the current residents, so if you're residents, if you're living with us in the fall and you're going into the spring, even those who come with us in the spring will have the opportunity to participate in this process. It is an opportunity to apply and hand select specific space for the upcoming year. That is so important because that is not something that our new incoming students will have the opportunity to do. They also get to do it before my team starts assigning new incoming students. The big thing to remember is that you have to be a current resident to get this priority to participate in this process, meaning that you live with us in the fall or you're incoming and you're going to live with us in the spring. Both parties will be able to participate in return to campus living. And it's a little different application process. One, students apply for housing, and after they submit their application, which includes their housing contract, they then get to go back in and actually select the space that they want. Now, if you hear the word lottery, you should associate that with chance. It is not a guarantee. It's a lottery number appointment. Doesn't guarantee a housing assignment, but it does provide an opportunity, i.e. a chance to participate in the process.
So the first step of that is the actual application. And so that will open on January 27th for women and January 29th for men. There is absolutely no magic to being the first person to submit an application. It is not a first in, first win scenario. We also don't want students to wait days to apply. And so the magic is not necessarily being the first one in line, but not waiting until days and days after, right? And so we will close it when we get to a cap. The other thing we want people to know is that women and men don't compete for space, right? And so we intentionally stagger this so we don't send everybody to the system at the same time. If we do that, we will undoubtedly crash the system, right? Even Ticketmaster has trouble, right, when they have high demand. And so we intentionally stagger this so we can manage that demand. Because men and women don't compete for the same space, we intentionally stagger their access to the system at a couple of key points. And so women don't have an advantage by going first, men don't have a disadvantage by going second. And so we do this really to help people have a good experience in the system. So the key is being able to apply pretty quickly after that application goes live, but not having to be the first person in line.
So how we make the magic happen? Because we have a lot of people who are interested in living on campus. With this lottery process, the lottery numbers are grouped into designated open room selection appointment times. So if you hear me, lottery numbers basically are associated with the open room appointment time. The appointment time does not mean you have to be right there at the exact time, but it means the earliest time that you can get in and try and select your space. Students will be sent an email. Those who are able to participate in the lottery process, were able to get a number, they will be sent an email on February 7th for those who actually were able to do it before the application closed. As I indicated, the lottery number does correspond with your appointment, open room selection appointment time. There's a series of numbers for each of the appointment times. So it's not going to be, as a resident, I'm the only one trying to get in and select the space. As Christy indicated, the thing to remember is that men will not be going for female spaces, so they will not be competing against each other. The reason that we also use lottery numbers is because we're trying not to crash the system. We're trying to stagger access so that we don't overload it at any point, and so everyone has a good experience. We also want to make sure that we give everyone who applied before the application closed the same randomized chance for timely access. And I know questions arise based on that. In the frequently asked questions, I'm going to hit a little bit about that, about why we use this randomized process. The most important bullet, I think, on here that I want you to remember is the closing bullet. A lottery number does not guarantee the opportunity to choose a space during open room selection. Again, remember, lottery number, chance.
So we talked about the application. We talked about students getting a lottery number. The next big action piece for students is February 11th for women and February 13th for men. That's when, if a student has applied and gotten a lottery number, they will log back in and try to select a space. And so again, like Carla said, they'll get a lottery number, and that lottery number will correspond with an open room selection appointment time. We want students to log in as close to the start of that appointment time as possible to choose a space. And so that happens again on February 11th for women and February 13th for men. And again, because women and men don't compete for a space, women aren't at an advantage by choosing first, and men aren't at a disadvantage by choosing second. Again, we're just providing access at different times so we don't overload the system. And we choose to do them on different days, again, for sanity and so that we don't crash the system. And so February 11th is the day for women and February 13th is the day for men. And as long as they're logging in as close to the start of their appointment time as possible, that's the key on each one of those days.
So roommate groups. Roommate groups are limited to 2 students per group. One of the reasons that we do that is to give more folks an opportunity to get into some of the space that might be more preferred over others. The way this works is one student has to create the group and invite a second student. And that's not the end of it. In order for it to be a complete group, that second student needs to actually accept the invitation to make it a complete group. It's like a handshake. Roommate groups will need to be completed during the week of January 27th, because that's when we begin the process. And it requires both students to have a completed housing application. So you complete the group by one person doing the invitation, second person accepting it, making sure that both parties have a RTCL housing application, and then those individuals have a better chance of being able to get together. Now, that leads to the next bullet. Roommate groups are not guaranteed. They are they're dependent upon the successful creation of the group and space availability. And what that means is I could have a complete group, But if I've waited late or I've had a later appointment and none of the other spaces can accommodate 2 people, then we would not be able to accommodate that roommate group. 2 individual roommate groups, and this is a question we get frequently. What if I want to live with 3 of my other friends? 2 roommate groups can work together during open room selection to try and get 4 spaces together. It is definitely more difficult because whenever you're dealing with more people, you're going to find fewer spaces the more people that are involved in the process. So it's not impossible, it's just more difficult. So I've said chance, I've said lottery. So there are some people who aren't going to make the cut. Some people will not be able to actually select a space. At the end of the day, we simply have a lot of interest in living on campus, which is a good thing. We have great demand, but we're not going to be able necessarily to fulfill everyone's wish. Everybody will not be able to select a space. So what we do is we create a wait list. And the way this wait list works is if an individual who is participating in RTCL is unable to select a space, we will immediately place them on the wait list. Now, in bold, and we had many discussions with students and parents alike about this wait list. I need, if nothing else, you to hear this. Students placed on the wait list will still have an active contract until they cancel or they are released from the wait list on April 2nd. So what's going to happen throughout this process? We will get cancellations. We will process changes. Individuals will go into reserved spaces. They may take jobs with us and go into reserved spaces as well. So there's going to be a lot of shifting of our inventory. So during that time, the assignments team is looking at that wait list, working through that wait list to try and assign as many people as possible. So for that reason, you still have an active housing contract until 1, you cancel or automatically are released on April 2nd. One of the things in red here, students placed on the wait list are encouraged to check their UNC Charlotte email regularly and verify their on-campus assignment before signing an off-campus lease. Please understand, I've already indicated that you're going to be placed on the wait list. You have an active contract. What individuals fail to do is if they sign that contract and they have that contract and then they go and sign a lease off campus, they then have 2 contracts and they're in a difficult position. So what we want folks to do is absolutely, if folks decide to go off campus and look for opportunities there, that they first, before they do that, to avoid any financial consequences, that they look at their email on the regular and that they check their housing portal to see if they have been assigned. Again, the big thing is before signing an off-campus lease. We want folks to be informed consumers, and we don't want students to be in a difficult position. And again, last but not least, students who are on the wait list and are not assigned will be released from their housing contracts by April 2nd. Please note, it is not the expectation that by this webinar and this webinar alone, that folks are going to remember all of these dates. We send numerous emails out to students. We post information on our website to make sure they're duly informed.
So some other important contract information. The first cancellation deadline, that's the opportunity for students to cancel their housing contract without financial obligation, is April 1st. And returning residents who want to participate in this process are not required to pay the $100 non-refundable housing application processing fee. And as we've said a couple of times, participation in this process doesn't guarantee housing. So those are all really important notes, right? We want students to participate in this process, but we also recognize that there are a couple of really important factors at play, right? At the same time we're running this process, our off-campus partners at the off-campus apartment complexes are also filling their beds. And so we try really hard to align our process in a way that keeps student options open off campus. And so the later we run our deadlines, the fewer options students have, right? And so we really want to make sure that we're running our process in a way that keeps options open for students off campus as well. And so we try to keep all of those in mind as we set up our processes. And so that deadline, that first deadline is really important. Students have until April 1st to walk away and make important decisions for themselves off campus without any skin in the game. But they've got to do that by April 1st. Similarly, we want them to be able to participate on campus if they want to, without having any kind of financial barrier. And so there's also some incentive for them to be able to play in that sandbox without having to pay an additional fee. And so we don't make them pay that again. But the flip side of that is there's no guarantee in that process.
So if you are one who's more turned on by visual things that actually lay it out for you, I like this. I have to see it in my face to make sure that I am somewhere in the process. We provided this for you. So if you look at the section that's the darkest green, apply for housing, you actually have to apply. So I know there are a number of students who may be in special programs, my athletes out there. Everybody who wants priority in this process has got to apply for housing. So even if you're in a special group, you need to actually do the application. There are also some groups that are assigned based on their program, so they may not actually get to select their space. They still have to have an application. You got to do the application, put the preferences in. Part of that application is doing your contract, signing your housing contract. So making sure that you do that. Again, those dates are, I hear you out there saying January 27th and January 29th, January 27th for women, January 29th for men. So then the next phase would be receiving lottery numbers. We already talked about lottery numbers corresponding with appointment times and when they open. There's a series of lottery numbers for each appointment time. It does not guarantee that you will be able to select it, but lottery numbers will be shared on February 7th. And then the last phase of this is, of course, for those who are able to select rooms, they'll be able to go in, select rooms, log in close to the start time for your appointment. Roommate groups have to already be created by that time. If you are in a roommate group, one individual will be able to go in and claim spaces for both partners in that roommate group. You'll be able to select those rooms. Again, the lottery-based open room selection begins on February 11th for women and February 13th for men. That's the process for RTCL. Those are the various steps.
This is probably the slide that students are most interested in. And so these are the buildings where we have space reserved for returners. And I won't read these off, but again, this is probably of the most interest to students. And the insight I will give you about these spaces is that this is mostly apartments and suites with some more affordable spaces sprinkled in because we recognize that some students want a single room experience, but not necessarily at the price point of an apartment. These represent all of our villages, south, east, and north. and are really, as has been the case for many years for return to campus living, really our most popular spaces, which has been the hallmark of return to campus living. That's the one thing that hasn't changed. We've made a lot of changes to this process over the years, but the one thing that remains true is that returning students still get the most preferred spaces, and though that's what we hold for them year after year after year. And so these are the buildings that we anticipate will be on the market for returners in return to campus living.
Biggest takeaways. So if you remember anything from all of the slides, this will at least get you in the right direction. RTCL begins the end of January. We will start doing a lot of promotions around this, so the students will be duly informed. Application the 27th for women. It opens the 29th for men. Space for returners is limited. Students, in order to participate, they must have a lottery number. In order to do that, they also must complete the RTCL housing application. So we will not know that a student exists unless they actually get in the pool to swim. They've got to do the application. We've said this a number of times just to make sure folks understand the lottery number is purely a chance, not a guarantee to choose a space for open room selection. These are the dates for the lottery open room selection. Open room selection simply where they go in, they look at various room types, they see what's available, and they choose what they want. February 11th, it opens for women, and the February 13th for men. We've indicated our roommate groups are a max of 2 people. Again, they have to be complete. So there has to be an invitation, and there's got to be someone who accepts that. And usually that's where the breakdown occurs, quite frankly. A student may be good enough to send it, but fails to circle back to make sure their friend actually accepts it. And then the students who are waitlisted should check their email frequently. There are a number of students who just didn't check their email in the last year. And unfortunately, it does not serve them well. So you need to check email. You can check the housing portal. You can always call housing office. And we tell students that we generally staff up a little during this time to make sure that we are responsive to your needs. And of course, you can send an email. First cancellation date is April 1. April 1 is the cancellation date for individuals to cancel with no financial penalties who participate in RTCL. That is not to be confused with a later cancellation date that is given to students who do the new application. April 1 is the date for RTCL participants because they get their assignments earlier. And then the bonus behind participating in this process is those who participate in RTCL do not have to pay the $100 application fee.
So knowing that on-campus space is limited, we have off-campus student services as part of a unit in Housing and Residence Life, part of our unit. That exists to help students make the most of their off-campus experience. That includes the Niner Choice program. And the Niner Choice program has been around for several years. And it's a safety education initiative that's really designed to help students and their families make well-informed decisions about off-campus housing options. There are lots of options off campus. You drop a pin in the center of campus and draw a 2-mile radius around campus. There are more than 2,000 beds. So lots and lots of options and lots of complexes that really specialize in student housing. They do the same kinds of things we do, they just do them off campus. And so the properties that are in the Niner Choice program are part of a partnership between our office, CMPD, and our own police and public safety. And so if you're looking to jumpstart your off-campus housing search, even before return to campus living or just after return to campus living, we'd recommend starting with the 12 properties that are in the 9 Choice program. That's really our way of shortcutting your off-campus housing search. That is not an endorsement of those properties. It is not the university's stamp of approval, but it is certainly a good way to begin your search, because those properties have to meet certain safety standards and record keeping to be able to get into and stay in the program. They have to submit to an annual assessment of their property and a review of their files every year. And they're the properties that we work with most closely. And so there are 12 properties in the program currently, several more looking to join the program or rejoin. And so it can be overwhelming to try to narrow down your search. And so we've done a little bit of that work for you by working with the properties in the program. So Labria Wilson, who is featured on this slide, is the Assistant Director for Off-Campus Student Services. She works in our office. She's another fantastic human being who could be an excellent point of contact for you. She's the one who works most closely with these and other properties who work with students and can be a great point of contact as you're searching, but also once you live off campus, if you run into any difficulties, can be an excellent point of contact if you're struggling and need some help, even if it's connecting with an on-campus resource, she can be a good point. Some additional important context. We want you to understand a couple of things. On-campus housing is a really valuable, but also a really limited resource. We tell people all the time, we've got 6,000 beds on campus, just north of 6,000 beds, but there are 30,000 students. And so we're absolutely designed to enhance the student experience, but we are not designed to accommodate every student or even most students for every year that they're here. And that's startling, I think, to folks like me, for instance, who had a residential college experience. I had a small college experience, and so it was really eye-opening to me to work at a really large public university, but that is not the norm. And so we don't guarantee housing for any student, and it is not the norm for most students to live on campus. It is absolutely the norm for most students to live off campus, and that's really unsettling when people come in and expect that most students will live on campus. Most students don't live on campus, and so we do our best to house as many students as we can for as long as we can, but the reality is with 6,000 beds and 30,000 students, we can't house everybody. And so on top of that, the demand for on-campus housing has increased significantly in the last few years. Those of us, Carla included, who've been around for a number of years know that we used to have to work really hard to get returning students to convince them to stay on campus more than a year or two. And since the pandemic, we've had them not working. And that's collided, that's really intersected with a live-on requirement. And so more returning students want to live on campus at a time where we've had to carve out more space for first-year students. And so that's necessitated some changes to this process. And unfortunately, that's uncomfortable. Change is really hard. And so we've got responsibilities to try to balance as best we can the needs of returning students with the needs of incoming new students. And all of that means balancing those student needs with supporting the university's strategic planning and enrollment goals. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A because we got some really good questions as part of the registration process, and we want to talk through those. But we wanted you to understand the context, right? We don't make these decisions in isolation, and we do our very best with the finite resource we have and to balance all of those competing needs.
So the dates to remember, these are things you should put on your planner somewhere in your calendar. The 27th for RTCL application opens the 27th for women, the 29th for men, We also have an off-campus housing resource fair, which I think is absolutely excellently planned for those who are considering living off campus. That's where you have a captive audience. You'll have all of the properties that are able to participate will be here, and you'll be able to ask them questions about off-campus options, all the amenities. That's a great resource. You'll hear more about that. But again, that's January 28th. Remember, I said the lottery numbers are going to be distributed on February 7th. And then when they actually get to open room selection, you buy the lottery appointment, that'll begin on February 11th for women and February 13th for men. The last thing that we like to make sure that folks remember is first cancellation deadline. That means if you cancel by April 1, there's no financial consequence. We have a graduated financial consequence that occurs thereafter. So if you're looking to get out of this with no additional financial obligation, then you would want to make sure you do that cancellation by April 1. One of the things I also like to tell students and parents alike, unlike many schools, what we try and do also is offer a variety of room change periods for those who may have been lucky enough to get space, but let's say it's not necessarily something that was one of the top choices. And so what we do allow is room changes. We usually schedule a room change period sometimes between the spring and summer. And we do that basically because by that time, any of our organizations that have reserved spaces, we take some of their space back, or we discover other ways that we can use our space. So we want to make sure that students who landed in space also have an opportunity to do room changes to get closer to something they might prefer. So we do offer room changes. Whenever we offer room changes, we make sure that all of our students are notified well in advance about the room changes. We typically do that process online. Usually it's during a morning. And again, it would be like 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We had an online room change session just yesterday for our students. So we do offer that as an option. We also recognize that we have some pockets of students who may have reserved housing because they're in a particular program, i.e. students who require accommodations due to any particular situation that requires a physical accommodation or space. We have housing that's designated for honors. We have sorority housing. So those particular special pockets, athletes as well, they also receive special outreach from our office, giving them additional guidance on what they need to do. So watch for those emails if you're in one of those particular pockets.
So Carla, I'm going to jump in real quick. Carla's got some answers. These are largely taken from the registration questions that you also helpfully submitted. But with the time we have left, we want to be sure we can answer any other questions you all have. So if you haven't already, please submit questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those too. But we want to be sure we get to these. These are the ones submitted largely in the registration. And while Carla's doing that, a few of us will look in the Q&A and see what we can pull out of there as well.
So we are frequently asked from students about what percentage of space is allocated for returning students. So we allocate about a third of our overall inventory is going to be reserved for returning students. And that's going to be divided between spaces for men and spaces for women. People ask a lot of times for us to look at crystal balls. What's the odds or chances of a returning student? What's the odds or chances a returning student will be successful in RTCL? And it also depends on how you define successful. So successful may be getting a space. Successful may also mean getting the exact space that I want, and we can't make a prediction one way or the other on that. We can tell you that we don't have a mechanism that helps us determine how successful students will be. What I can tell you is over the course of time that I've been here, students who are attention to detail, who actually listen to these dates, they do the application, those individuals definitely have a better chance of being successful than the ones who don't participate. And so I just encourage all students out there and their parents, if you're going to nudge your student, to be cognizant of the dates because their success is largely dependent upon the action that they take, quite frankly. Why isn't housing guaranteed? I'm going to tell you that if we were able to do it, it would make everybody's job easier. I've been at a place in my 21 years here that I've been here that we were able years ago to do this. But right now, we just have more demand than we have space. So we have just moved away from guaranteeing. Again, we want to make sure we're being transparent with students and parents alike so that you can plan accordingly and make plans that best suit your needs. We also just have more students who want to return to campus living. So we are unable to meet everyone's need. So one of the fairest ways we decided to do is go to the lottery. So why have a live-on requirement? Both UNC Charlotte and national research show that students who begin their journey by living on campus usually graduate at higher rates. And interestingly enough, I can tell you in my time here, more often than not, I've had students and parents, when we've done sessions with admissions, inquire about if freshmen are required to live on campus far before we even considered enacting this at UNC Charlotte. So we want students to be successful. We want them to have a solid foundation. That's one of the reasons that we have this live on requirement. One of the things that you will see also is that folks ask, why can't we prioritize one specific group over another group in our RTCL groupings, i.e. sophomores, juniors, seniors, and quite frankly, there are just too many people in all of those groups to try and prioritize one over the other. And everybody's got a compelling story, quite frankly. So we're trying to be fair and consistent. It's just really tough to prioritize one group over another. How much is this going to cost you? When will we know next year's rates? We know that's quite important. We hope to publish the rates on our website by winter break. They have to be approved by the Board of Trustees. So once they are approved, we will put those rates up. And again, we're hoping to have them put up by winter break. Does financial aid cover off-campus housing expenses? Yes. It does. You are the thing that's a critical difference for on campus versus off campus. And off campus, you are paying your rent directly to your landlords, which may include fees due before the start of the term. But you do have the option to use your financial aid refund to help cover your rent. So in your planning, you just need to be aware of that. So the payment timelines may be a little bit different. And then what should you do if you're interested in exploring off-campus options now? We really recommend that you begin your search by checking with the 9 Choice program. These are 12 properties in the program right now, and others are joining. Several of these properties are within walking distance, if not shuttle distance, of campus. And it's a great time to lock in with lower rates before everyone starts making plans for off-campus housing. This is the time to do all of the research, go out. A lot of these off-campus properties have great websites, and they're more than willing to answer any questions that you may have. And remember, we also have an in-house expert resource if you want to reach out to LaBria Wilson.
Okay, Carla Hines, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so I think we stumped people a little bit with roommate groups. And so we might need to clarify a little bit. Can you walk folks back through roommate groups? And specifically, we might need to clarify a little bit that when somebody creates a roommate group, how that works, that they're selecting for them and for somebody else. And that how we coach people about the earlier appointment time. And so if you can start there, and then I've got a follow-up question.
Okay, so let's say that Christy and I are friends, and we currently live on campus. I'd like to think that Christy and I have had some conversations about where we want to live. We may want to be on North Campus, or we may want to be on South Campus. So this involves actual dialogue between the two people that are interested in living together. So what I would do is say, hey, listen, I'm going to invite you, Christy, to be my roommate. Are you interested in living together? Christy says yes. So I go in, I do my RTCL application. I also create a roommate group by one, requesting, sending an invitation rather to Christy. I have to have her student ID number. I send a roommate request to Christy. Christy gets an email that says, you've been invited to a roommate group. Okay, so she gets an email or a UNC Charlotte email account. When Christy logs in, let's say Christy's done her application or she hasn't done her application. Christy logs in, she does her application, she sees a button that says she's been invited to participate in the group. Now, if Christy likes me, she can accept that invitation. If she's thinking, I don't want to live with Carla, she can ignore it or decline it, okay? Either or. But in order for it to be a complete roommate group, Christy has to accept that roommate, and that means that's a complete roommate group. The critical thing is that Christy has to do an RTCL application in order for it to be a complete RTCL roommate group. Now, when open rooms, well, when we get our lottery appointments, whomever has the earliest appointment should be the one that goes in and does the selection for the roommate group. Because I know that, let's say, some of the most popular spaces or apartments in a particular complex may go quickly. So if Christy has a 9 a.m. appointment and I have a 1 p.m. appointment, guess who's going to be selecting the space? Christy's going to be going in and she's going to select the space for the two of us. Again, that's why it's important that we will have had a dialogue about what types of rooms we want. Does that add the clarity you wanted?
I think so. So let's talk about this scenario. So let's say that you and I are in a roommate group, but I log in at 9 a.m. and I see a space, an individual space that I like, that I want, but there's not room for you. Can I go ahead and choose that space? And what happens to you?
No, and you will not be able to choose that space unless you break up the roommate group. Because right now, I mean, at this point, when you have a complete roommate group, it sees you as a group of two. It doesn't see you as two individuals. So you would have to kick me to the curb, and you would have to get me out of that roommate group. You would have to get out of that roommate group, rather, and then you could go individually and choose for whatever you want. But essentially, it's you taking a declarative action.
Thank you. Okay. So I think that's all of the open questions. One of the questions that I think Elizabeth answered already is what time will the application go live? We do not publicize that date, and I did not make that real clear on that slide. And here's why. We're not trying to be secretive. We learned the hard way not to publicize that date, or that time. When we publicize that time, everybody rushes to the system at that time, and then we crash the system. So if we turn it on very quietly at some really nondescript time, then it's a smoother process for everyone. And so we intentionally don't publish a time. And so we're not being evasive intentionally. We're doing it for the betterment of the system and the process and the experience. And so we won't publicize a time. We will just turn it on quietly at some odd hour. And that's again, so that the process runs as smoothly as possible. Okay, one more question about which Snyder Choice properties offer transportation. I don't have that committed to memory, and so we'll have to get back to folks about that. Generally, so if you ask that question and want to send us an email to the HRL mailbox, Labria or I can send you a follow-up email, and I'll put the email address up here in just a second. Generally, the ones that are closest do not have shuttles because they are within walking distance. And then the ones that are a little bit further out tend to have shuttles. That's the easiest way to remember. And so I don't want to tell you and be wrong. And I don't have this committed to memory, unfortunately. If Labria were here, she could do it. And so the other question is, so, oh, that one's gone. Okay. So if you'll send us an email about that, we'll be happy to respond tomorrow. Okay, I think that's it. So I'm going to wrap this up. We're a couple of minutes over time. So if you need more information, here's how you reach us. Our office is located directly across from undergraduate admissions, next to Levine and Wilson Hall. And our email address is hrlmailbox@charlotte.edu. And our website is there, housing.charlotte.edu. We will absolutely be available 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And happy to respond via email. There are a few of us who monitor that email box. And we will post this webinar in the next few days. And so you'll be able to find that linked from our website as well. So we appreciate you spending some time with us this evening. We know you could have been doing a number of things, including online shopping or doing any number of chores or homework or studying. And so thanks for spending some time with us this evening. We definitely appreciate it. Big thanks to Elizabeth, who masterfully managed the Q&A behind the scenes, and Casey for her moral support, and Carla for being our resident assignments expert. So thanks for being here. Again, we really appreciate it. We hope you have a great evening, and please be in touch if we can be of any help. We really appreciate it. Take care.
Bye all.